Hey guys, what's up? My name is Sky Webb and I'm here to talk about a true crime story that I cannot get off my mind. But before I get started, I just want to put out a little disclaimer that I mean no harm to any of the victims or the victims' families, and I wish everyone who was hurt within their story the utmost peace and solace, either in rest or in recovery. With that out of the way, happy True Crime Thursday and welcome to 2021. Can you actually believe that 2020 is over? Is this real? Oh my god, this is so cool. I really hope we can make this a better year, but I'm not holding my breath because I feel like that's a trap. So let's just hope that this year is filled with new good opportunities and hope and positivity and peace in the world. That would be nice. Before we start, I want to ask you guys your opinion on my channel and the content that you're seeing. Are you happy with the content that you're seeing? Do you want things to be changed up? Are you happy with True Crime Thursday? Do you want more? Do you want less? What do you want? I'm coming and asking you guys because at the end of the day, well, I mean, I guess I could make videos and post it only purely for myself, but there's no point in that without you. So I'm really appreciative of everyone who actually does watch my videos and helps me, Your opinions mean a lot to me and to my channel, and I want to give you guys what you actually want, not just what I think is whatever, because sometimes I feel like I have a very bad gauge of what is good and bad and what people want and don't. So please let me know in the comments down below or in any of my socials, which you can find linked in the description. Thank you very much. Today we're looking at a very interesting woman named Ruth Ellis, and she was the last woman to ever be executed in England. Ruth Ellis was born on the 8th of October 1926 into a family that would go on to have 5 children. Ruth was the middle child, and her family lived in Wales before they all moved to South England when she was still a child. Her parents were working class. They didn't have a lot of money coming in, despite Ruth's dad actually being a famous, or sort of semi-famous, and professional cellist player thing. Which was pretty cool, but despite that and him traveling a lot, both parents were super involved in their kids' lives. At 14, Ruth dropped out of school so that she could become a waitress and bring in a little extra cash, and the year following that, her and her family actually had to up and move further south due to the German soldiers actually dropping a bomb over their house. The family home was completely destroyed, and so they really had no other choice but to keep moving. A few years later, before Ruth turned 18, she had an affair with a Canadian soldier who was obviously spending time in England, and she fell pregnant to him. They didn't continue the affair. That's all it was an affair while he was there. He went back to Canada, back to his wife, and he continued to pay child support payments until she gave birth to a boy named Claire, until Claire turned 1. I'm sorry if I'm talking in a really nonsensical way. It's been a very long day. It is very hot in here. I'm running very late. I have to go to hospital tomorrow, and I don't know what's going on, but I'm just trying to get this done. Such a good start to the new year, isn't it? Just like me to be on the ball. Ruth was a real big fan of the nightlife. She liked to go out clubbing, she liked to go out to parties, and she made a lot of connections that led to her becoming a nude model shortly after she gave birth. She then went on to become a club hostess at the Court Club, and she met a lot of people there. Her work became really overwhelming, not necessarily in a bad way, but it just took up a lot of her time. She was out very late, she was drinking a lot, she'd often be hungover. She had a lot of time and energy going into her work, and her work was sort of a lifestyle. It wasn't just a job you come and go to, it became a lifestyle, and so she didn't really have time for her son Claire. So she actually sent Claire to go and live with her mother, and her mother raised him. But at this point, Ruth was making a lot of money. She was really raking in the dough, so she didn't really care about that at the time. She was obviously making a lot of money. She was a very, very beautiful girl. She got a lot of attention, especially being a nude model, especially being a hostess at this club. She was getting so much attention, and she really just felt like she was on top of the world. She was really enjoying it. Her manager at the club, though, his name was Morris. He was quite a nasty man, and he would bribe all of the girls that worked there into having sex with him. At the time, it didn't seem like that really bothered Ruth because she was making enough money that was okay type of thing. And she was happy to sleep with him. Maybe not happy, but like it didn't bother her to sleep with him the way that it did a lot of the other girls, unfortunately, to them. Either way, it's horrible and a disgusting position to even be in. But shortly after this, it kind of gave her the idea to become a working girl. So in her early 20s, she became a sex worker while still working as a nude model and as a club hostess. So she was really making bank at this point in time. Unfortunately, she wasn't taking precautions when it came to her sex work. She was having unsafe sex with majority of her clients, and so she actually fell pregnant to a client. So she took time off work, but only 3 months into the pregnancy, she decided that she couldn't do it anymore. She needed to go back to work. She needed the money, and so she actually had the pregnancy terminated. One of Ruth's regulars was a man named Ruth Ellis, and he had 2 kids of his own, and he also happened to be an alcoholic, and he was also a retired dentist, so he pretty much spent all his money on alcohol. And in 1950, Ruth ended up marrying her client, George, which I just gotta say is like literally every client's dream. Like, how did he manage that? I don't know. I just realized you can see my pajama shorts. Oh my god, it's been a really long day, dude. During the relationship, George became super possessive and controlling over Ruth, and their relationship was really on and off and on, because Ruth would get over the possessiveness and leave, and then she'd come straight back to him. She fell pregnant again, and this time she decided to keep the baby because she was pregnant to her husband, who she loved and who she wanted to have a child with. And so she had a little girl who she named Georgina. And during her pregnancy, she actually featured in her first movie, which was Lady Godiva Rides Again. So she was super excited about that, and then she was super excited about Georgina. Unfortunately, when Georgina was born, George refused to believe that Georgina was his. He thought that it was someone else's, because of her job, I'm assuming. Ruth only kept Georgina because it was her husband's, who she wanted to have a child with, but now that he didn't even believe that it was his, she didn't really want a kid on her own, and so she actually gave Georgina to her mum to raise alongside with Claire. The turmoil that this caused between Ruth and George, it couldn't be mended, and so they actually got divorced. At this point, Ruth went to go and live with her parents and her 2 children, and she lived there for a little while and actually got to spend time with her kids, because previously she didn't see them. But while she was there, she went back to sex work, so she was happy doing what she liked to do and making the money that she liked to make. And then in 1963, that shady manager Morris, he asked her to come and run a club in London, and she said yes and was out of there and stopped seeing the kids. So Ruth became the manager of this club in London, and she actually lived in the tiny flat above it. So she worked and lived very close. It was great for her. And while she was managing this club, she became a really high profile personality. She was super well admired. She was like a very well-known sex worker and well-known club hostess and manager, and so people just kind of loved her, and a lot of men would shower her in gifts and attention, and she loved it. When she was 27, she met a race car driver called David Blakely, and a week later they moved in together. So despite David actually already being engaged to Mary Dawson, I'm so sorry girl, he moved into Ruth's tiny little flat above the club. And shortly after moving in, she fell pregnant again, and this time decided to terminate. She, at the time, felt like David was more into her than she was into him, and so she started an affair with another man called Desmond. Desmond was 32 years old, and he was super well off. He lived a really lavish life, which she was very attracted to. Ruth actually ended up getting fired from the club, but she still had her flat at the time. And she was still with David, but by now David was seeing other women as well. Despite them both cheating on each other, they just wouldn't split up. I don't know why they wouldn't, but they just couldn't. Their relationship very quickly turned violent because of this, because they had resentment and jealousy over each other cheating, and yet they both individually would not stop cheating and they still wouldn't split apart. And so they were also very big drinkers, both of them, very, very into the alcohol and the nightlife, the clubbing scene, and so they got really violent. Ruth would often walk around with bruises all over her from times that they had gotten into an argument and David had hit her, and it wasn't a very healthy relationship at all. Again, despite their crazily toxic, horrible relationship, David wanted to marry her. I'm completely at a loss as to why, because again, he was seeing other people. So I don't know, there's like a bug. Maybe it was like a control thing, and like because she wasn't fully into him whereas the other girls were, he wanted her instead. I don't know, but it was ridiculous. And she didn't want to marry him. She didn't want to marry him because Desmond wanted to marry her. So both guys that she was still both dating both wanted to marry her, and she was like, oh, I don't know what to do. So she was stuck in a very hard place at this point in time. And then 2 years into the affair, Ruth fell pregnant and she didn't know whose it was. So this caused a huge fight between her and David, because obviously David wasn't happy if it wasn't his, and he wasn't happy at all in the fact that she had to question whether it was his or not. And so he got really violent with her, and he actually punched her in the stomach multiple times, which resulted in her miscarrying. On the 10th of April 1955, Ruth was at Desmond's house and she was trying to get in contact with David. For what reason, I'm not entirely sure, but he was ignoring her. So in her time with Desmond, Desmond had not only gifted her a gun, but he had taught her how to shoot it. But she got that gun and she put it in a handbag and she got in a taxi and took the taxi to David's friend's house, which is where she knew that David was. And I don't know why she wanted to get onto David so badly, especially when she was already at Desmond's. Like, she could have just stayed with Desmond, but for whatever reason, she was desperate. And as she got out of the taxi, she spotted David's car. And just as she spotted it, David's car drove the fuck away. And instead of getting back in the taxi, she decided to just walk. And so she walked in the direction that his car went until she came across it parked at a tavern. So she waited outside for over an hour, just standing there by herself, waiting for David to come out. And when David came out, she said, "Hello, David," like thinking she'd done something, but he ignored her, which made her really unhappy. So she started yelling his name, and she's yelling, "David, David." And he continues to ignore her, and he's like drunk as, stumbling, looking for his keys, but purposely ignoring her. Like, it was very clear at this point that he was ignoring her. And so she pulled out her revolver and she shot, and she missed the first time, which gave him enough time to start running away. But she was chasing him and was right behind him and shot again. This time she actually hit him, which caused him to fall to the ground, and she stood over him now and she shot 3 bullets into his back. At this point she was trying to like empty the gun, so she just kept like clicking it, but it wasn't shooting because it got stuck. And so she's like click, 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 like, and didn't like really expect a bullet to come out because she had clicked it so many times. So when it finally did come out, she kind of like got jolted, and then the bullet ricocheted and hit a poor innocent woman in the thumb, unfortunately for her. But luckily she wasn't really that badly injured, thankfully. Ruth was actually arrested by an off-duty police officer who was at the tavern. He walked out and she was like, "Are you gonna call the police?" And he was like, "I am the police. I'll just arrest you myself." So she went with the police officer and she made a really detailed confession. She explained exactly what happened. She was really forthcoming, wasn't worried. She was seen by a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and she was found of sound mind, and she pleaded not guilty because she claimed she was provoked by David. But her version of being provoked was like him not answering her, not him like attacking her at the time. Like he'd obviously attacked her previously in other like arguments and things, but that's not self-defense if it's at a different time. When she was actually on trial, she refused to answer any of the questions that the prosecutors asked her, except for one. The only question she answered was, they asked, what was your intention when you shot David? And she was like, well, it's obvious my intention was to kill him. So after 20 minutes, Ruth Ellis was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Desmond actually remained completely on her side throughout this whole ordeal, and so did her mother. Her mother begged and pleaded with Desmond, although he didn't really need much convincing, to get a really good legal team because he had the funds for it. And then they both begged and pleaded the legal team to try and fight the death penalty by hanging, because they just wanted her alive. So the lawyer wrote a really long detailed letter to a higher up official pleading with him to you know, spare her life. But unfortunately for them, the plea was denied and she was given up on. They pretty much just gave up on fighting it. On the 15th of July 1955, Ruth Ellis was hung, and she was hung from like an 8-foot drop, and it only took 12 seconds for her to actually die, but she was left to hang for well over an hour, which is so disgusting. Like, that's so fucked up. I'm so glad that we've come so far from then that that's not a thing that we do anymore. Like, that's wild. Ruth's death actually had a really big impact on a lot of the people in her life. Her former husband, George Ellis, became really depressed after hearing about her execution, and he ended up hanging himself. Ruth's son, Claire, he suffered from psychological problems and issues after his mother's death, and the judge that actually ruled Ruth's case and sentenced her to death, he sent money to Claire every single year as some type of like compensation for the fact that he ruled his mother to death, which is like, again, wild. And he did that every single year up until Claire took his own life, unfortunately. And then even then, the lead prosecutor that obviously helped prove that she was guilty, he paid for the funeral, which is so unheard of. Like, what? Also, unfortunately, Ruth's mother as well, she was found unconscious after a gas leak had occurred in the home, and she never fully recovered, so she was unable to take care of the children, and Georgina was actually adopted out. That is the case of Ruth Ellis. Please let me know what you think about this one down below. I think this case is just wild. She obviously had a very crazy, like adrenaline-filled life. Like, not many people have lives like that, I feel like. I don't know. It was just very full on. Let me know what you think about her and her husband's, what you think about why she didn't just leave for Desmond. She obviously had the means to, he had the money to, she could have escaped. Why do you think she killed him on that night? Why then? Why not out of self-defense in a time where she could have actually claimed self-defense because he was attacking her? Do you know what I mean? Let me know what you think in the comments down below, or you can head over to my social medias, which are all linked in the description down below. I would love to hear your opinions on this case because I think it's crazy. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you feel like it. I would really appreciate it, and be sure to subscribe so that you can see all my new videos. I post every single Thursday, but I might change that depending on the comments and the feedback I get from you guys, whether you are happy with that or not or what. But subscribe anyway, because at some point I'm going to post something and you don't want to miss it. Make sure you guys are being safe out there. Don't ignore your girlfriends. Do not pretend you can't hear them when they're calling you, and most importantly, do not walk away from them or you will get shot in the back and die. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe. Bye. One of Ruth's regulars was a name named George. But Ruth only kept the baby because it was George's. That's weird. So I'm not high, I'm dumb.